Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nate vs. Hot Takes, your favorite podcast on YouTube that uploads sporadically every 3 to 10 business months. Seriously, though, guys, thank you for watching already. I know it's been since, I believe, September since the last episode, but we're not going to talk about that because that's not relevant. What's relevant today, we got music hot takes. We got a bunch of wonderful hot takes from viewers. We've got a couple from viewers, and we got one from the internet, from a trusted source on the internet. But with all that being said, I hope everyone had a very Merry Christmas. I hope that if this comes out after the New Year, that you've had a great New Year. If it comes out before the New Year, have a great New Year. But we're gonna get straight into it. Let's go into Nate versus Hot Takes. Okay, everyone, the first one will not be a viewer take. They will be coming after this one, I promise. Our first take comes from the Rolling Stones. They compiled a list of 500 of the greatest songs of all time. The list was entitled The Best Songs of All Time. And at number one, they have placed Respect by Aretha Franklin. And this is what we're going to debate, if this should be considered the number one song of all time. And it's a complicated take, because the real problem that I have with this list in general is that the title of the list itself, it says 500 best songs of all time. The issue with that is that best is such an overarching word and it combines so many things. Respect is an incredible song, and that's pretty factual. I think everyone can pretty much agree on that. Aretha Franklin is exceptional. She has a ton of skill. But the word best is so vague. It depends. You could be ranking songs on how talented the artist is, on how well it was received publicly, on how much impact it had socially, or on its record sales. So there's a lot of things within the word best that I think makes it difficult to dissect this take. But I think that when you look at the rest of this list, the trend that I've kind of noticed is that I think the Rolling Stones have kind of, instead of doing the best songs, it's more some of the more influential songs throughout history. And in the top 10 to 20, you've got Bohemian Rhapsody and Smells Like Teen Spirit and Johnny B. Good. You know, Johnny B. Good was one of the first rock and roll songs. Chuck Berry was a real trailblazer. Smells Like Teen Spirit was an anthem, you know, for kids in the 90s, I guess that was. I think that was the 90s. Bohemian Rhapsody is one of the most adventurous songs of all time. It's an absolute odyssey of a song that goes on forever. But these kinds of songs, along with Respect, which had obviously a ton of societal impact that came along with it as well, these songs are more of the songs that encompass the top songs on this list. And I think the issue with this is that the Rolling Stones maybe should have made a couple of separate lists. If you want to go for the best songs, maybe musically, like technically, the song's great, and if you want to do another song, it's influential. And I think that Respect has both of these things, but I think the issue with it is that there are a couple songs that kind of beat it out in one way or another. I think that if you're arguing most influential song, it's really hard to beat Respect. Aretha had a powerful message, but if you're going popularity, I think there are a lot of songs, not a lot of songs, there are a couple songs, even songs near the top of this list, that might edge it out and also have some of that impact. You know, some of the songs I mentioned earlier, I think you could arguably definitely put Bohemian Rhapsody above Respect and call that one of the best songs of all time, or the best song of all time. So I think the issue is that it is a great song. Respect is incredible, but I don't know if it deserves to be considered the number one song of all time. So because of that, I think I'm going to call this one invalid. I don't want to discredit Aretha Franklin or this song. It's really an incredible song, but I think that there are a couple pieces that just barely are gonna edge it out there. So we're gonna call that one invalid. And now we get into viewer takes. Thank you to all of you who sent in takes. Can only select a couple, obviously. But this first one is gonna come from a fine young lady named Lily. And this take says, the pop music industry, has been going downhill since the fall of Katy Perry and Bruno Mars. This is an interesting take. I think especially for people of my age and my generation, that was some of the music that we grew up with, that 2010s, mid-2010s era, and a lot of us consider it one of the best eras of music, especially pop music, when you had people like Perry and Mars. I think I'm going to expand this take a little bit. Katy Perry and Bruno Mars are more of a microcosm of what was an incredible era of the 2010s. You had Adele, Ed Sheeran, Justin Bieber, you even had Taylor Swift. They were all at incredibly highs during this period. So the amount of star power, really, that the pop music industry had in this time period was really incredible. And if you want to go back to Katy Perry and Bruno Mars, I mean, oh my goodness, they were dropping album after album. They were hit after hit after hit after hit. I think if you compare that today, it's very difficult. And even with nostalgia taken into consideration, which I think is a big thing, especially for teenagers and people of 20s, 20-year-old people, I think it's difficult when you take nostalgia in consideration. But I think even beyond nostalgia, if you compare today or even the years before today to, we'll call it like 2015, mid-2010s, it's difficult to compare that to what we have today. I mean, obviously, recently you have a couple of artists that are starting to pop up. Namely, you got Sabrina Carpenter, who's really popular this year. Chappell Roan, you had Teddy Swims, Benson Boone, Shabuzi. They all had some hits. But I think that the issue is that when you compare them to the stars in this era, the Katy Perry and Bruno Mars kind of era, it just does not equate at all. I mean, you would have albums during the 2010s that would have 4 major hits on it, and now you're struggling to find 4 major hits from 10 artists today. So I think that's the issue, and there has even been some carryover from artists from that era into this era. Obviously, you still have Taylor Swift. Bruno Mars made a little bit of a comeback this year. He had 2 songs that were really popular. But the issue is that there's just not enough. Bruno had 2 hit songs, but it's like there wasn't a lot else from him. He just did it because he was out of money. Taylor Swift is here, and obviously, as popular as she still is, her new album, Tortured Poets Department, more like Tortured Vocal Cords Department for me. It just was not as popular as many of her previous albums. And I think that a lot of fans of Taylor Swift will agree. I'm not too big into her, but I've seen, even just from popularity from people that I know, they will say that the album is not great. We'll actually talk about it a little bit more later. Bruno Mars, I'm going to go back to him. He had Die With A Smile, was a huge hit. He had it with Lady Gaga, who was also really popular during this 2010s-ish era. Well, I can't speak today, guys. I need a Christmas present of some new vocal cords. But I think the issue is that you're having stars that are falling off a little bit from that time period into today, and that is what we're seeing, and they're not able to produce the amount of hits today. So I think what it comes down to is the amount of stars and the amount of hits from the 2010s, like from that Bruno Mars, Katy Perry era, to today. There's just cannot equate. They cannot catch up. There aren't enough stars, old or new, to really compare to what we see today. So I think that this take is definitely valid. I think, in my opinion, the 2010s, that era, was really a golden age of music, especially pop music. You had so many stars that were just so great. I'm a big Bruno Mars fan. Ed Sheeran was there. I mean, Taylor Swift was obviously at her peak. So I think it's just so hard to compete with those artists. So definitely a valid take. Thank you, Lily, for submitting that. It's very well done. But I will say, Bruno Mars, his comeback this year, even though he just did it for money, was really great. His 2 songs, Apata and Die With A Smile, were exceptional. And we've got another take from a viewer. This one is going to be an anonymous viewer, and this is: Eminem is the greatest rapper of all time. I wore this shirt in preparation for this take because I have a lot of opinions here. I will say I'm a big Eminem fan, and obviously probably because I'm a white boy, whatever. But I think this take runs into a lot of problems that our first take with the Rolling Stones came into. What do you qualify a great rapper as, right? Is it speed, like skill when it comes to actual rapping? Does it come to writing lyrics? Does it come to popularity or record sales? It's really difficult to bring all of these things into one, and that's why it's so difficult to say this is the greatest rapper of all time, and that's what I'm struggling with saying Eminem here. But I think if you look at all those areas, you can say Eminem, obviously, oh my goodness, this guy can rap like crazy. I mean, his speed is insane. His bars are insane. His skill when it comes to writing is almost unmatched. If you look at record sales, he's sold some of the most records out of any rapper of all time. Popularity is where you start to find an issue. Some people really, really like him. Some people absolutely hate him. Some people like other rappers, maybe like a Drake or a Tupac or Jay-Z a little bit more. So it's difficult in that sense. But I think in a lot of other areas, M is really, really talented, and he has this rare combination of he has this skill, he has that writing skill and that rapping skill. He's also really, really popularly received, and he's had a ton of longevity throughout his career. So I think it's difficult to compete with M, and I think you could definitely make a valid case for another rapper to say he's better than him, especially because M, a lot of people argue he's kind of fallen off recently. His last couple albums have not been great. You could definitely make an argument for maybe like a Drake, like I said, or maybe an earlier rapper like a Snoop. It's definitely an argument that you could make, but I think if you're looking at pure statistics, I would have to look at the exact numbers for record sales, but I think Eminem is definitely up there. Obviously, his talent is nearly unmatched. So I'd have to say I think this take is valid. I probably have a little bit of bias. I am a fan of him myself. But I think it's really hard to compete with him. But I wouldn't be mad if you made an argument for somebody else. And with that being said, that is 3 takes. That was 3 takes really fast. But we're going to get even faster. We're going to have rapid fire. But before we do, it's time for a hydration break. Always remember to stay hydrated. This isn't water, but that's fine. Go to your nearest faucet, get some water, or your favorite beverage. And now I think we might as well be ready to go into rapid fire. We got 2 takes that we're going to do real quick. We've got another viewer take that we're going to do. This one's another anonymous take, and I mentioned this one earlier. This says that Tortured Poets Department is Taylor Swift's worst album of all time. It's difficult to say because I'm not as much of a Taylor Swift fan as obviously a lot of the public are. But if you're looking at sales and reception, I think that there's a lot of merit to this take. I've talked to a lot of my friends who are a lot bigger Taylor Swift fans. They've said, yeah, it's like 30 songs or something like that. It's super long, and there's not really a lot of great songs. I mean, I couldn't even name a song that's come on the radio. Typically when you have Taylor Swift come out with an album, her last album was Midnights. There were a couple of songs that were on the radio. I'm like, oh, these songs are not that bad. But with this album, I have not heard anything. It's just been radio silence from Taylor. So I think there's a lot of merit to this take. People have said it's convoluted, it's long, it's really philosophical for no reason. So I think that this take is going to be valid. I'm going to call this one valid. I think she just needs to take some more time. From what I've seen, her period from Midnights to Tortured Poets Department was real small. So I think that what Swift really needs to do is take some more time, look at her formula, what helped in the past, and really go back to that. And I think that she still has the skill to put out a great album, but this was just not it. So valid take, well done from the viewers. I think are 3 for 3. Yeah, viewers are 3 for 3 so far. Let's see if we can go 4 for 4 with this next one. This one is from Aria. Thank you, Aria, for sending in your take. And this says Billy Joel's album The Stranger has no skips. Once again, kind of difficult to say. No skips is obviously, it's kind of a term. But if we're taking it literally, I'm going to say it's invalid, but we're taking it unliterally, and you're saying it's a really great album, I will 100% agree with you. This album has Movin' Out, and Vienna, and Only the Good Die Young. Those are 3 of his most famous songs. They're really incredible songs, and the whole thing is very well done. And the only real issue that I have is that there's 1 or 2 songs that I kind of got bored during. Scenes from an Italian Restaurant is an 8-minute song during this album, and me personally, I just don't like some of these longer songs. I find them to just be boring, and I just found myself falling asleep a little bit during this one song, and there were 1 or 2 others that I also just wasn't a huge fan of. But I think as a whole, this album is exceptional. Billy Joel is a really great artist. I think he was in my Spotify Wrapped this year. So I'm going to say, if we're taking it literally, I'm going to say invalid, which we probably aren't, so it's a pretty valid take. This is a great album. I'm not going to discredit this album at all. Billy Joel is an incredible artist. So we'll say the viewers went 3.5 out of 4. Once again, thank you to all of y'all who sent in your takes, and that is the end of Rapid Fire. Take another sip of my Coke. That is refreshing. And yes, if you see I will be posting stories on Instagram next time I post an episode, so y'all can send in those those takes through DM. And I would love to see them. There was a lot of selections from this one. These were the ones that I took. Maybe in the future we'll do a couple more rapid fires so I can fit a couple more of y'all's takes into these episodes. But I really liked a lot of the takes that were sent to me. I just had to pick a couple few. But now we're done with Nate versus Hot Takes. It's my turn. And I don't have too many strong opinions on music. But there's one thing that I really love, and before let me play the little video. Nate's Takes. And we are here, and I have one take. And this is the 80s, the 1980s, is the greatest era of music ever. I don't think it's particularly close. When you look at this era, the thing that I love about it is it's got so many of these great artists, obviously, like so many eras do, but it's the plethora of different genres that you see just go throughout this era. I mean, you've got older artists, and we talked about Billy Joel. He was still releasing albums at the start of the 80s, and you had groups like the Beastie Boys, who I also love, also a completely different genre, who started to come out during the end of this decade. There were a ton of great albums. You had Slippery When Wet from Bon Jovi, Bad and Thriller from Michael Jackson, and AC/DC had Back in Black come out. It's just incredible. Even just if you look at that small list, it's just a small portion. It's so incredible to see there's so many different artists. I mean, Michael Jackson versus AC/DC. I mean, they're two completely different artists, and they both had an incredible height during this time. You had Madonna, you had Toto, Elton John, David Bowie. I mean, once again, these guys are all so different. If you compare Madonna to David Bowie, you kind of can't, because they're really different. But there's so many other artists that you can't even name, because it would just take up the entirety of the video. But this is what makes the 80s special. You have all these artists and all these hits in all of these different genres. You have rap. Beastie Boys were kind of rap, and you were getting into the birth of hip hop during the 80s. You had maybe a little bit of end of disco music. ABBA might have released an album during this period, or very close. Maybe in 1979 might have been one of the albums that they released. And then you had rock and roll was obviously so prevalent during this time. But those are three different things that you just really won't see in a different era. I mean, if you look at right now in the 2020s or even back in the 2010s, you don't really see a lot of difference. It's a lot of just pop and maybe some rock that are really popular. And that's the thing as well. It's not just that these songs are coming out, it's that these songs are smash hits across the world, not even just in the United States. You had, the Second Invasion coming from Britain. It's just really incredible to see all of these artists thriving. And that's why I think the 80s are better than any other era. If you look maybe earlier in like the 50s or the 60s, you kind of had the birth of rock and roll, and that's great, but you don't really have as much breadth in the genres that you're choosing from. 60s, 70s, kind of the same deal. You still had a little bit of rock and roll, maybe some disco, but hip hop still really wasn't a thing yet. That's when you get to the 90s. The 90s has hip hop, and the 90s is one of the decades that you could really argue, I think, make a great argument for. It's better than the 80s, but I think the 80s spreads a little bit wider, goes a little bit wider in terms of artists, in terms of stars, in terms of genres. And that's why I think it edges out the 90s a little bit. I would love to say the 2010s are better, but it's just a lot of pop as much as I love the 2010s. And the 2000s were a lot. Let's just say that. The 80s just wiped the floor clean, I believe. There's just so much talent. Michael Jackson, one of the greatest arguably the greatest pop star of all time, is at his height during the 1980s. And that all goes into the 80s are the best of all time. And that's my only take. I don't want to anger a bunch of music nerds with this video, so I will not talk about that anymore, because I would prefer to keep my head. With that being said, though, this might be a shorter episode. I don't really know. I can't see the time in front of me. But thank you so much for watching. I apologize for the very long gap between videos. I'm going to try to get out another one maybe in 2 weeks. We'll see how long editing this one takes. And we're going to do the classic YouTube ploy. Like, comment, subscribe. Show this to your friends, maybe. Follow us on Instagram at Nate vs. Hot Takes Pod. It'll probably be linked in the description. But yeah, if you liked it, please let me know. Send me a DM on Instagram. Drop a comment. I'm so appreciative. I love that I get to be able to do this. It's such a fun thing that I get to do. And without all that being said, remember, I'm Nate, and that's just my take. Thank you, everyone.